All right, hello, welcome everyone to Fan Funds for Marginalized Groups. My name is Tammy Coxen. I'm going to be your moderator, and I'm joined by two awesome panelists. We're going to introduce ourselves right now. I asked people to say where you're from and the convention you're working the hardest on right now, because it's SMOFCon, so we're all working on multiple things. Tammy Coxen, I live in Ann Arbor, Michigan in the United States, and I am working hardest on SMOFCon at this immediate moment, that's for sure. All right, let's go to Kris.
I'm Nchanter. I also respond to Kris. My pronouns are they, them. I live in a town called Salem, Massachusetts, north of Boston, which is known for some history about witches a few hundred years ago. And the convention that I am, I was about to say the only convention I'm working on, but I've just picked up another small role for something. But the convention I'm working hardest on right now is ChiCon 8, the 80th Worldcon, happening in Chicago in September of 2022 as head of program.
And Kevin.
Hi, I'm Kevin Roche. I live in San Jose, California. I usually broadcast from here in the Satellite of Fun. I am still working on Worldcon 76 from 3 years ago. But I am also now the president of SFSFC, San Francisco Science Fiction Conventions, Inc., which is running CostumeCon 39 and WesterCon 74 this coming year. And I'm, in addition to that, the president of the International Costumers Guild, which has fingers in all sorts of convention-related activities. So.
Busy, busy, busy.
Busy, busy, busy.
All right. So the word fan funds in convention running parlance, especially in Worldcon parlance, has had a very specific meaning for lots and lots of years. And it referred to funds typically to get people from one place to another, right? So the TAF and DUF funds that were about sending delegates from England to America for Worldcons or North America and vice versa, right? But the fan funds we're talking about here today are a little bit different. They're specifically funds that have been designed to help improve the diversity of Worldcon, make Worldcon more accessible to a variety of people and perhaps different people than have been able to attend before. Certainly the things we're going to talk about, all the examples I think we have are primarily Worldcon specific, but you could take these and apply them to a local or regional convention as well. I'm going to kick things off because I don't know, somebody can correct me, but I think that I was responsible for sort of kickstarting this model that we're going to be talking about when in 2014 I was the chair of DECCON 1. That was the North American Science Fiction Convention, or NASFiC, that was held in Detroit in July of 2014. And I'm going to post some materials in the channel on Discord for folks who want to follow up afterwards, because we documented what we did there, and I'm going to talk a little bit about it, but if you want to see sort of the deeper descriptions of what we did, I will have a document there for you. But basically our goal was to provide free memberships to needy fans who wouldn't otherwise be able to attend. So the way it worked was that we had a $55 sort of was our basic starting membership fee. And so for every $55 we got donated to the convention, we would buy a membership from ourselves and give it to someone who wouldn't otherwise be able to attend. And we originally conceived of this as a way to improve racial diversity at DECCON 1. This convention was located in the city of Detroit, has some of the highest poverty and unemployment rates in the country, and 80% of the population is Black. So we really wanted to make the convention accessible to anybody in Detroit who wanted to attend. So we defined the program as being open to all, but we gave priority to residents of Detroit and Wayne County, and hoped that by using these parameters, we'd improve our racial diversity in addition to income diversity. We positioned it as an income program, but we're sort of hoping that it would be a diversity program as well. Application form was really simple. We just asked people for their name, age, contact info, if they wanted to come, paragraph about why they wanted to attend DECCON 1. And we didn't like judge you based on your paragraph, but we were able to use quotes from those to sort of talk about the sorts of services we were doing for the program. We did not do any means testing. We just let people self-identify themselves and trusted that attempts to abuse the system would be limited. I'm going to share my screen if I can figure out how to get the one that I want up. There we go. All right. FDF right up. There we go. All right, so hopefully you can see on my screen here the by the numbers. So this is the result of the DECCON 1 fund, received some money and also a lot of donated memberships. And so this enabled us to let our dollars go farther. People would donate their memberships if they couldn't use them instead of cash, and then we could pass those on. And we were in the end able to serve 66 people. One of the things that we quickly learned is that we needed to be able to deal with families who wanted to attend together. And when we would go on to adapt this model for Dublin in 2019, that was one of the things that we took into account there. Was it's one thing to give a membership to an individual person, but then they have to attend by themselves. So instead of doing that with Dublin, we offer the option of attending with someone else. One of the big stats that we have here is the no-shows or last-minute cancellations. And so this was definitely something that we found that a lot of people did not. We also have some data here about race of recipients as best we could estimate it. But one of the things that we realized was that we should have added, I don't know if I have it in this bit. I don't know that I have it in this bit, but one of the things that we took away from it was we thought that the fact that it was an absolutely free membership was perhaps a bit of a challenge, perhaps a barrier, right? Because people don't tend to value what is free. And so we were concerned that people were like, oh, I'll take this free membership, and then didn't actually follow through on using it. So again, when we adapted this for Dublin in 2019, we added a pay what you can option, and could be as little as €1. We didn't have any limit there, but we wanted people to sort of have some skin in the game, for lack of a better word. Other things that we learned from the DECCON 1 program was that we think we could have gotten a lot more cash donations if we'd had a way for people to give money to the program when they were already spending money with the convention. And then the other thing that we learned was this idea of needing a fund administrator. I was kind of doing this on the side while being chair, and Reg was sort of involved, but there was nobody in charge of the program. It really would have benefited. A lot of these people were new to Worldcon, or new, in our case, new to the NASFiC. And so would have been really aided by a little bit more hand-holding, a little bit more like, here's where to go, and we'll maybe even have some people to greet you there, and that sort of thing. So that's actually, I think, where I want to turn things over to Kevin, because I think that the way this kind of idea of targeting specific groups to attend, the way that played out next was at Worldcon, the one 76. In San Jose.
Worldcon 76.
Worldcon 76. And then I think we really, and you guys kind of took that idea and took it to another level. Esther, you had a question. Do you still want to be unmuted, or can you drop it into the chat? I've gone ahead and given you unmuting. Go ahead.
Okay, so the question that I actually have is that it is a little bit more than that. It's not just giving people membership. How do you allow people to attend when they need to pay to have hotel rooms and yeah, I'm
Yeah,
guessing
absolutely.
kind
And
of
we're
come
gonna,
into that. So
yep, and we're we're gonna get into
Okay,
all of
cool.
that. This was like the initial thing. Let's just get memberships in people's hands because our folks were located, because we were targeting people in Detroit. We were like, most people are going to commute home at night. So we didn't feel like we needed to take as much concern about supporting those other aspects, but that's going to be different for different conventions, as we will hear. So Kevin, gonna turn things over to you.
Okay, so we also don't want to omit the work that Connor Bust was doing.
Different program being run by an outside
Right.
organization rather than the convention itself, but absolutely doing fantastic
Right.
work.
So,
Happy to
one
have
of the
you
things,
speak to
yeah,
that.
one of the things we did with Worldcon was we initially donated some memberships to Connor Bust, and then we were watching our numbers, and every time we hit a certain money point, we'd add another one. So that we were doing that right off. We also had a hardship request. You could go to member services. Because we had some people who were donating money informally for help with memberships. But what really kicked us off was John Picasso, who was originally brought in as our Toastmaster, and then when we hit the right membership number, he was actually named our Artist Guest of Honor. And in the meantime, John De La Rose was pissing him off beyond belief, in particular with his continued specious claim that he was the preeminent Hispanic voice in speculative fiction. And so John Picasso said, I want to do this thing. I want to do the Mexicanx initiative to bring fans and pros from Mexico and Mexican American fans and pros from inside the States. And how can we do that? So we had an administrator. John was willing to administrate it, to do the selection process. We handled the money. So the money was all going through our nonprofit so that we didn't have a tax problem created for John Picasso. And it just went into high gear immediately. People loved the idea. A little while later, after we announced it, one of my staff members, Chuck Surface, said, as an ally, I would really like to do the same thing for GLBTQ. And so we delayed a little bit announcing that because we didn't want to take the momentum out of the Mexicanx initiative getting started. But then we announced the second one. And one of the keys was, you mentioned being able to donate during registration. We had that built in, but we also had straight to PayPal buttons on our website. There was a donate page. So people who did not want to open up their registration and make changes could still do it. People who didn't want to register but loved the idea of sponsoring somebody's membership could do that. We did have a per person cost for members. So that was the value of a membership. And that was what we charged the administrators for the membership. But they could also choose to use those funds for travel funds and other things. There was a significant amount of work done for our Mexican guests to try and make sure that there weren't any visa issues for travel. We still had a couple who decided they weren't willing to go through Customs and Border Protection with Trump as president. So they canceled, they didn't attend. And in fact, John read a letter from one of them in our opening ceremonies, which was, yes, very political, but I thought very appropriate because we had members of our fan community who didn't feel safe coming to our Worldcon. And so we were letting their voice be heard. It was kind of exhilarating. And we basically were willing to set up any more of these funds if we had a sponsor step up who was willing to be the administrator. And one did happen. Mary Robinette Kowal did one for Hugo finalists and then expanded it to, first it was for writing Hugo finalists, then it was for any Hugo finalists, and then it was pretty much for pros who needed help getting to Worldcon. And so that one, she was handling all of the money and everything, but we helped promote the fact that it was happening. So we had these 3-4 different streams of money trying to bring more new people in. And it was really exhilarating to see how much it took off.
All right, so I've already talked a little bit about how where this went next, at least in where I was involved with, which was the following year, Dublin, which also had a fund. We called it the Fantastic Dublin Fund instead of the Fantastic Detroit Fund, but largely followed the same model. But we did have some differences. So one, I talked about, we turned it into a pay what you can sort of situation. We had a number of different streams, similar to what Kevin is talking about, where we were targeting different kinds of audiences. And then the other big change, I think, was that we were explicitly providing support for program participants and beyond just this idea of a membership, taking into account what the full package of needing to attend a Worldcon was. And so I'm going to turn things over to Kris and Nchanter to talk about that.
So what Dublin did for that is we had, as Tammy said, we had sort of multiple streams, and for program participants, we offered a flat rate stipend. Both, there was the option to give a membership and then a flat rate stipend, which I think was 400 euros.
400 euros.
Yeah, to assist in the cost of attending a Worldcon. Because oftentimes, as I think many of us know, that the membership cost, as much as a Worldcon membership is higher than your regional or local fan-run conventions, it's actually usually not the highest cost. Travel, if you're not local, or lodging, again, if you're not local, or even if you are local, eating out tends to be more expensive than cooking and eating at home, or even your local sort of normal food takeout sort of options. And so that was, and the decision was made during a period of time where I wasn't involved. I took a break from my involvement in Dublin in the middle due to family life stuff. But there was a decision made to give a one-size-fits-all stipend, I think in an effort to be fair.
And specifically, we should say that stipend was for
program participants.
Program participants, and specifically program participants of color and other marginalized communities. So yes. Primarily this, I mean, that this was very much a diversity driven.
Yes, this was targeted towards people of color and members of the LGBTQIA+ community. And so people did need to, there was an application process. They did need to say in which way they qualified for the fund. We did have some people apply who didn't actually meet that criteria under our viewpoints. And then we ended up giving, awarding these funds to, I think, about 10 participants. Program had, the program division did have input, obviously, with worked with the fund administrator to make sure that the people who applied as part of program participants were actually going to be accepted as program participants, and to make the sort of selections there that made the most sense for program and the convention as a whole. We did have a few, we got some donations after those awards were made, and we did end up giving a little bit extra money to a few through that Hugo nominees who were also program participants of color who had last minute unexpected additional travel costs, and we were able to give to a few of those as well. And that really highlighted for me, and I think for us in general, those of us involved, that while a one-size-fits-all stipend can seem fair and equal, it's not necessarily always equitable. Which sort of brings us into the different sort of model we're using for ChiCon 8. the 80th Worldcon in 2022. And there's a couple of streams going on there. One thing that there's several things going on there. The fund, we are having a fund that has both prospective attendees can apply for, and also prospective program participants. We're going to be, some portion of those funds are specifically going to be reserved for program participants. And instead of a set amount, we are going to be asking when people apply for funds to help them go to the convention to tell us what they think they need, and both in a, here's the minimum I would need to be able to attend the convention, and here is what would make it most would be best for me. So giving a range, and then the administrator will work with them to put together a package for what their needs are. Additionally, for attendee members, we're doing the pay what you can option that Tammy had talked about. And for program participants, we've actually set aside a bucket of, the convention has set aside a bucket of no cost memberships specifically for program participants, that actually I, as program head, or my designee on my staff, are going to be giving out. Sometimes in consultation with the administrator, the fund administrator, but doesn't necessarily need to go through that. And the goal there is for when my team is doing recruiting, especially of local program participants who fit into these historically marginalized groups, again, targeting Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and also the LGBTQIA community, that we can go to them and say, hey, we want you at our con, and I'm not going to make you jump through hoops to be able to get some assistance there in terms of membership. If they want additional funds, they are going to have to apply to the program, but that's a thing we're doing, and that I'm excited to see how that ends up working out. Tammy, do you have other stuff to sort of contribute on the ShyCon end?
Yeah, I guess I would say on the ShyCon side, yeah, I am the fund administrator, at least at this point. And so, you know, I'm quite trepidatious about this. Tell us how much money you need and we'll see if we can give you any. So that's definitely going to be a different evolution of this, but I definitely hear what you say about, you know, equitable. It doesn't mean the same, right? And so trying to meet people where that, I think, is going to be really important. And anybody can apply for those funds. That's not limited to program participants. That's open to anybody, including attendees. So yeah. Do we have any questions? Esther, you sounded like you had strong feels. You can go ahead and unmute yourself if you want and ask a question at this point.
Yeah, I feel like I have sort of multiple very sort of unsubstantiated questions, but so a lot of the stuff that I've been looking at recently has said it's not about including people, it's about allowing people their own space. So it's not about kind of saying, hey, come and be part of our group and, you know, lift for us. It's about giving people the space to do that. And that's the thing that I really want to do. And I think it's very difficult to walk into that because as a white presenting person, I can't do that. That's completely ridiculous and is, yeah. So I feel like I'm kind of at this transition point at the moment where I would really, really like a lot of people to take part in Glasgow, but I'm not really sure how to do it because we've got the money, we've got the will, we've got the understanding. But I'm going to be honest, I don't think that Worldcon's a really great space for it. So we don't really have the space. So I don't know how to get people in. And I think that's my big question.
Right.
How do I do that as, a Mexican white person who's got no right to have any call in this?
So I think the first thing I'm going to say is tomorrow we're doing an anti-racist convention running panel.
And you know what? They held it over the fucking Worldcon question time. So it's literally over the panel that no one can see. And Tammy, you know what? I'm really angry about that, because that's the only panel that I really wanted to see. And it's literally over our question time.
You don't have to stay for your whole question time. Like, you're broken up into pieces, so feel free to jump off and go to the other item.
Kind of do, though, and
it will also be recorded.
To me, it feels like one of the most important panels of the weekend, and yeah.
Scheduling people across.
I know scheduling.
12 time zones.
I'm sorry, but
12 time zones was really challenging.
I know.
We are committed to having things be recorded. Esther,
Yeah.
I know you can't skip the bid session, but definitely,
I've actually
I am the moderator for the bid
team
session
to be in that session, because that's a session that I think is more important than answering ridiculous questions for SMOFs. So
yeah.
I'm the moderator for that session, so I'm happy to have you just join for your bit and not stick around for the other two people who are presenting. So
yeah, Mary Robinette's been worrying about it. So anyway,
yes, because what we're talking about here today is really like the financial piece of it. That's really what these funds were designed to handle. But you're absolutely right, Esther, in that there's so much more to making a convention actually welcoming to people. Getting people in the door, giving them a membership is just this small piece of it. And then it's what do you do once you're there? And that's where I thought that the work that John did with the Mexican X initiative was so good, because he really organized activities and events and ways for people to really get engaged in the convention and work with other people. And I thought that was really, really valuable. And that was that piece that I feel like we were missing with DECCON 1 for sure. And even with Dublin, was how do you work with people once you get them in the door?
And I think following up on that is that getting people in the door early, and also I agree with you, Esther, on the this is a big, complicated thing that you knew was not a clear, cohesive, easy to answer question. That supporting the work that for the communities that you want to support, be it the queer community, be it people of color, be it whatever, who are underrepresented in the spaces that you may already be participating in, is going out and supporting them in their own spaces, and over time developing relationships that hopefully then enable people who want to participate in stuff like Worldcon. And a lot of people don't, and that's fine. Have them help. And also, but when you're starting out, is making sure to start out from a place of not just, well, who's already been here and who's already helping and who's already involved, but starting out from a place of, once you've made contacts or when you have referrals or whatever, really getting the input there and prioritizing that. And I know this is a little bit off the topic of this panel, but is more to the thing. It's not just about being welcoming and inclusive. It's about prioritizing the participation of people who have been historically, because this is what we're talking about, people who have historically been excluded from these events within our community. And not just saying, hey, yes, you can come, because clearly that hasn't been working, because that has traditionally been an attitude. Well, anybody can come. Well, only sort of. It's about being actively welcoming, prioritizing their participation, which then often will get claims from people from certain corners who are then, well, you're putting some people above others, and that's not the spirit of fandom, and blah, blah, blah. And that's, again, a whole other conversation and a whole other panel.
Yeah.
I am happy to talk about some other time when you are available. You know, I've got thoughts and feels and things I'm doing with ShyCon to help step that forward. But it is hard. It's certainly hard with Worldcon in specific, which is most of what we're talking about here, or other ongoing events that have a history that people have attached ideas to. And that's everybody has these attached ideas to it, because if N years ago somebody had an experience at a Worldcon that wasn't welcoming to them, there's no reason for anybody to think that this next Worldcon is going to be different until we demonstrate. And these funds, to bring it back to the panel topic, these funds are one way to show that we are trying to prioritize. We'll get people who, I mean, generally white people, will say, hey, these funds are discriminatory. Why are we doing it, targeting it towards people of color or queer people? Why isn't it just means tested or just people who need it? And the answer there is because the access hasn't always been there, and it's a way to try and balance historical wrongs.
Because privilege is a real thing.
Yep.
No matter how much you want to claim that it's a colorblind world, privilege is a real thing. We have to deal with that fact. And it's also really important that as we succeed in bringing some of our friends in from these marginalized communities, we don't make them do all the work. You know, we don't say, great, you're here, bring all your friends. You know, that's not what's supposed to happen. I have to admit that, you know, I drove my treasurer crazy because, you know, I traveled around the world handing out memberships like candy. I had a chunk of my chair's budget, which was promotional memberships. I went to queer events, I went to drag events, I went to all sorts of things. And if there was some, you know, we always had Worldcon stuff with us. And if we got somebody who was really excited about what Worldcon was, maybe I'd give them a membership and check in with them. And most of those people showed up. So I have this giant interlocking social network. And so, you know, that was my privilege as chair, that I could travel to all these places. I used it. It helped a little, but we still had to have, you know, underwrite it, you know, and then also there were the occasions when things blew up on us because people have experience of being marginalized. And so they presumed malice when it was a spell checker. It was actually smart software being stupid that triggered the problem. And they went immediately to the world stage with their complaint rather than saying, what's with this in the draft? You know, that the big blow up over bogus pronouns was thanks to autocorrect.
I mean,
I want to quickly just sort of off of that. And I've, in reaching out and trying to get staff for ShyCon, I've reached out to some people of color who've worked on Worldcon in the past who told me no, because their experiences at Worldcon weren't great, and they're not going to come back until they see Worldcon as an institution, which all of us in here know is a complicated thing because it's not an ongoing organization, until they see several years of Worldcon not screwing up. And you know what? As much as I, as a con runner first, like that's what I am, as a non-white person, as a queer person, I'm working to do better and make it better. Like, I can't fault anybody. Like, the fact that my experiences haven't been worse or pushing out are a lot of luck. And there are some that I've had within this community that have really made me question. But then I have other people another within the community, like my reasons for doing all this could be a whole other panel on itself. But it, you know, it's understanding that and trying to compensate for that baggage that the other conventions, unfortunately, their screw ups affect. And so like when it's about patterns of behavior, which yes, ShyCon's different than DisCon, that is different from, you know, Dublin, which is different from Kansas City, which we who are insiders know that. But most of the people, even within the community who kind of know it, really don't get it. Or even if they get it, they're seeing some of the same people over and over again. See also Tammy's administer for several of these things. And I've worked on program for several, like, you know, we've all been around. Until we as a community demonstrate the importance of this and are willing to, again, prioritize the inclusion of people who have been wronged within the community, like there's no reason for them to. And I can't blame anybody, but I'm going to continue to do the work so that hopefully they decide to come back in the future.
And I want to jump in and talk about like the context that this lives in, right? To kind of take us back to that, what's the bigger look. The nicest thing anyone ever told me while I was running DECCON 1 was that they had heard through the grapevine that people were concerned that DECCON wouldn't be welcoming to older white fans. And that to me was a sign that maybe I was just maybe being welcoming to everybody else. Right. And I was trying to find the language for it, but we did our first committee meeting was a visioning exercise. And we had people say, what's your vision? And we consensed on a vision for the convention. It's actually even happened before the meeting. It was send me your individual vision. And then the process of the meeting was to consensus on a vision. And a key part of our vision was that DECCON 1 should be welcoming to everyone. Right. And so what did that mean? And how do we put it into context? So one of the things that we did was we launched this program to make sure that financially it was welcoming to everybody. But we also, because we had that vision, it drove so many of the decisions that we made during the convention. So a very, very small example, we had a doll costuming project, right? Where you make a costume and you put it on a doll. And we ordered Black dolls and Caucasian dolls. Right? We made sure we had some diversity of doll color because we were always thinking about what can we do at every decision point that's going to make this convention more welcoming and a better place to be. Did we get it perfectly right? Heck no. Did we try? We did. And I think I won't be on the anti-racist convention running panel tomorrow, but people who were involved with DECCON 1 will be. So you might hear all of that again tomorrow. I don't know.
Yeah, you want adventurers, try explaining how Worldcon works to a judge.
No, I don't. I hope to never be in that position.
We're happy to have you do that. Thanks, Kevin. We appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you for your service. Sorry, Kevin.
Looking back at the questions, not seeing anything particular in the chat that needs following up on right now. Did anybody else have a question they'd like to ask? We still have another 18 minutes of panel time, so. Gary, go ahead. You can unmute yourself. You are muted at the moment. There you are.
Doing that.
Great.
Okay, sorry I missed the beginning of this, so maybe you talked, but the main reason I both wanted to listen in, but I wanted to get your ideas on how the established fan funds can welcome in these one-shots. I mean, when I'm TAF administrator, but I am always raising money for the fan funds. I don't do just a TAF auction. And when we did the first one at Boscone, when I was still, when the vote was going on and before I was a TAF delegate, I reached out and we had the Otherwise Award was represented. I tried several times to reach out to Connor Bust, but that was right after Connor Bust had kind of gone to ground for a while. So I never successfully got to Connor Bust. But I really would like, kind of how can we meaningfully not just do it for, but engage and help bring in these one-off fan funds and be raising money for them as well as for the established ones. So it's more of a welcoming rather than an us versus them or anything.
Sure, sure. Well, I mean, if your model is like, there are these fan funds and we divvy up all the money that we get between these funds equally, it seems like hopefully most Worldcons moving forward will have some sort of crowdsourced program. So you could just designate that crowdsourced program as crowdfunded program as one of the destinations. So the Chicago Worldcon next year, for instance, has the Chicago Worldcon Community Fund. And you could just make a donation to them in the same way you would make it to other fan funds.
Right.
But what we look for on that is for the fan, for those funds to be participating in this. So, Diane Martin brought in things that we auctioned and then we shared all the money. And there were some things that were just for otherwise award and it went to them. But then there's a general fund that gets shared between people. Right. And I do know that the Brit model on this is different. We do an equal sharing, or the ones I've done, it's been an equal sharing for the core things, and when people donate things for a specific fund, it gets earmarked for that fund. But the core is all equal, and it's a little different.
That's something I could see. I mean, I know Chicago is planning to run a silent auction to support the fund at their table
at DisCon this year. Yep.
And that could definitely, I could see there being a way to share the labor associated with running the auction. And, so Chi-Con could donate its own items like you were talking about in the fund, but the labor is shared. That's a great idea. Kevin,
hold
on. I think Kevin wants to jump in.
Yeah. So one of the things that's really important, because so much of this has grown organically, but because John's Mexicanics program was so ambitious, we had to look at the money and tax implications right from the start. And so the moment you start dealing with an expanded grants program, because that's what we're talking about, is a grants program for participation in fan activities, you need to have a financial structure that protects the administrators.
Okay.
And so if we really wanted that. So if we really wanted to look at, a perpetual process, we could start, a FANAC grants foundation. And that could take on the administrative role. But another simple thing we can do is when we're dealing with bids, how are you reaching out to our underserved communities? As should be a standard question. How are you doing that? We get the question, how are you bringing in younger people? We should also be asking, what are you doing to make sure that people know they're welcome, not just say they're welcome?
Right.
Nchanter.
So one of the things I think here is that for a while, a lot of conventions were relying on con or bust because it was an organization that had their stuff together for a while. And as many of us know, they lapsed and they're now trying to look for somebody to take over the work that they were doing. So these individual one-offs came about in part because the centralized stuff had fallen by the wayside for a variety of reasons. And so, I think the way to work with these one-offs is to contact them each individually, because the last thing anybody wants to do is raise money and say it's going to go towards a thing, and then that thing doesn't want to accept it for whatever reason. Not that I think that's going to happen. It's just the sort of thing. But again, having a centralized, one of the reasons that I think there were years in there where like some of the Worldcons and some of the other cons weren't doing their own funds. And we haven't mentioned on this, DisCon does have an inclusion fund as well, just none of us are involved in it, was because Con or Bust was that was what the organization was doing. And people knew to go to Con or Bust to donate things, to help with the money and to ask for money. And that was really one of the benefits there. And so it is I think it's good that, for instance, you know, that we as Chicago are doing our own, especially because there is that gap in there. But it does make it harder for people to know to access, because each time it's called something slightly different and the rules are different, and that's you know, and I think it's good that ShyCons is different than Dublin 2019's, because we are evolving the model and trying to figure out what is best. But that is one of the sort of downsides there, and I don't have answers. I have more questions, right? And thoughts.
You know, I think we're in kind of as rapid prototyping a model as we can, right? Like every Worldcon does it a little differently. And then maybe at some point we will get to, hey, this is a model that works, and how do we institutionalize that model? Not that that's worked in a lot of areas for Worldcons, but we could always hope that it could work here.
If you can do it twice, it's traditional.
It's traditional, right? But then the third person to do it goes, oh, well, that's the old way of doing it. I have to do it completely differently, because now it's, you know, I'll do the thing, but I got to do it special or do it different.
But I mean, Tammy, you're making sure you document it out and have the printed resources is obviously great. So even if people want to do it a little differently, they have a way to run from it. And I have a whole nother panel. Like, I could talk all day, right, about con running, because that's who I am. But, you know, documenting these things, having process, making sure the process is out there acceptable for other people to do is another one of my soapboxes, and I'm doing with program for ShyCon, hopefully. But that is some of why we're having success on being able to do these programs that are hopefully, and the hope is that we'll get more and more pickup, both in terms of people who are using the funds from it and people who are willing to donate, when it becomes this hollowed tradition expected thing, as Kevin points out.
Yeah. we do have all the numbers for Worldcon 76, but I don't have them, partly because lawsuit ate my brain.
Yeah.
And I came on program for this fairly late. It didn't occur to me to go find them. I apologize for that.
That's all right. So definitely, as I say, I'm going to post the documentation from Dublin and from DebtCon in the Discord channel, and that'll be available for people. I think the Discord will be up for a while afterwards. So if you're watching this on recording and you're a member of SMOFCon, you'll be able to access those in the Discord. If you're watching it somewhere else afterwards, we'll leave a note in the details of telling you where to look for these materials if you want them.
I know we published them at one point. I know we actually, it was either at a SMOFCon.
So if you can track them down, please drop them into that Discord channel. I know it was a real disappointment to me. We announced after DebtCon 1, we had a surplus. We actually made money with the convention, and we announced that we were happy to provide seed funding to the next, similar type of convention that wanted to do a program, and nobody took us up on it. And eventually we had to close our books, and we just donated other things, right? So, so I was really thrilled then to see the stuff that Worldcon 76 did, and then have been glad that so far with 19, 20, 21, and now 22, we're sort of keeping some sort of version of this program going. And hopefully now we're locked in enough that it's tradition.
I think it is, because especially this model where you have more than one administrator. So if people want to pick a particular fund, they can do that. If they want to bring more of their community in, and they happen to have the privilege of money that they can give to it, there is a clear pathway.
Yeah, so that's an interesting question, right? Because, I think that Worldcon 76 is the only one that's really had these discrete funds with their own discrete champions. Chicago is just, we got this one umbrella that includes everybody. Dublin, we had different targeted groups, but it was under one umbrella for the convention. So that is a different kind of model. Does it diffuse? Did people donate to an individual fund, or was it a pool? So did you choose whether you're donating to the LGBTQI one or to Mexicanex?
You could choose one of those or to our general aid fund. So we actually had 3.
Okay.
And this was partly, I mean, because John's campaign was very seriously to bring in people who had never been able to come to Worldcon.
Sure.
And Chuck started the LGBTQIA fund because in his work, he'd realized how many fans in that community were interested, but life sucked. And so they didn't have the money for a membership. So that amount of money would be enough to make it possible, would reduce the barrier for them coming in, which thrilled me.
Yeah, Nchanter, thoughts on that?
Yeah, so a real quick thing is, and I actually have seen some people with a prior SMOFCon when talking about scholarships to SMOFCon and assistance there. There are several groups that do that. Aresia runs one, CanSMOF does. For years there was Connor Bust, there was donations to Connor Bust, and often I would see people really wanting to prioritize bringing in new people, especially when it came to SMOFCon as an example. And that's important, but also supporting people who are already parts of the community, who want to stay ongoing, who never had the means, don't have the means at the moment and stuff, especially for program participants and pros, because there's this, as many of us know, as con runners, there's some divide within convention running, that for many of us, this is our hobby and fandom is fun, and it is. But for a lot of people, especially when we're talking about stuff like Worldcon, where there are real professional consequences for artists and writers and editors and stuff being at Worldcon, good sort of consequences. And it is a place where business gets done, connections happen. And so it is also important to support people for whom this does affect their livelihood and career, especially when it comes to people with ongoing. So I think it's important to think about this in multiple ways, and I really support getting new people in, absolutely getting them the access, and sometimes you're at a one Worldcon and it can sustain you for several years in professional connections, especially as more of this stuff becomes virtual. And I think that's going to end up changing or altering a lot of the models again in ways that we absolutely do not understand yet, because we're not back at really full large size conventions again in our sort of convention world. DisCon is happening in person, but it's going to be a much smaller Worldcon than we would have had for DC in pre-COVID times. But there's just lots of ways to think about this, and I don't want people to. So many times I see so much emphasis on getting new people in, and we don't want to forget the people who have been contributing and are parts of the communities and assisting them.
Reduce the barriers.
I want to jump on that one, because we did ask people for the DECCON one. We asked people, why do you want to attend DECCON, right? And we got these great responses. And this one speaks exactly to that. It's been over a decade since I've been to a Detroit area convention. A medical problem limits my ability to find work, and I am dependent on friends for assistance. It would be nice to reconnect with Detroit Ann Arbor area fandom, even if just for a few days. And that person sought me out at the convention and personally thanked me for the opportunity to be there. And it was things like that that just made this such an incredibly rewarding program. Also had somebody, my sons and I have been through a lot of challenges with my health deteriorating due to a neurodegenerative disorder. It's been heartbreaking seeing how this has impacted my children. Science fiction and gaming have been one of the things my 3 sons and I have been passionate about. Going to this convention would be a huge joy to us and would give us the opportunity to strengthen our relationship with each other and do something we otherwise would not be able to afford to do. So, it's those actually being able to impact people's lives and share the joy with them, both just fans and professionals. It's really, really rewarding, and I encourage people to make it happen. And closing comments from Kevin or Nchanter?
I have connections from the Mahegonics initiative that are still there. A few of us, we just really clicked. And to my amazement, because I would never have met these people otherwise. And for me, Worldcon in particular, I always say, Worldcon is my World's Fair, right? So I want to meet all sorts of new people, and a few will be lasting connections. So these programs really help that. And if we go to this idea of we're trying to reduce the barriers to entry, that is our goal, whether it's cultural barriers or financial barriers, both. I think
Nchanter, final word comes to you.
No, I'm good. You two both were hitting on it on your comments, so I'm good.
All right. Well, thank you to everyone who attended. As I said, recording will be available, resources will be available. Definitely continue the conversation and ask questions on the Discord. Thanks for attending.
Okay.
Thanks to my fellow panelists. You guys are amazing.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.